Welcome back to our second edition of our Imposter Syndrome webinar series. Today, we're talking about being a first-time manager and dealing with imposter syndrome in that context. Now, remember that imposter syndrome is a contextual thing. It really depends on which situation is and what you're dealing with. But at its core, it's pretty much the same principles. So if you haven't had a chance to watch our first webinar yet, I would encourage you to check that out first. Take a pause here for a moment, go back, look at that one, and you'll be able to pick up a little easier with this one as we go forward. If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. We'll cover most of it. We're going to do a review to begin this one, but there are some key situations and key concepts we want to bring from that one that we won't have time to repeat here. So there's in particular one exercise that you want to look at that covers a lot of dealing with imposter syndrome going forward. And that exercise is unique. It's not unique to just, that exercise is specific to imposter syndrome, but it's not unique to that one concept we were dealing with, which was starting a new role. That is a universal way to deal with imposter syndrome across the board, and that applies here as well. We're going to do a different activity today, but this activity today will build on the last one. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that yet, I would encourage you to go ahead and watch that first, and then come back and check this one out, because this will pick up right where that one left off. For those of you who have watched that first one, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in again. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you walk through this one and find this one helpful as well. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Some of this will be review for some of you, again, like I said, but I'm going to go through the review parts pretty quickly. So again, just talk about who I am real quickly. My name is Dhruvi Harlal. I am the founder and principal executive coach of Nayan Leadership. Nayan actually means eyes in Hindi, and the whole idea is the more you see, the more you can do. You cannot change what you're not aware of. And most of what coaching is working in self-awareness and helping people identify their blind spots so they can effectively change them intentionally, as opposed to just changing whatever comes their way. Also, writer, photographer, serial entrepreneur, creator. I love to create things. Entrepreneurship is about creating things. Coaching is about creating someone's future with them, co-creating actually. And everything I do is something has something related to creativity of some sort. So I just enjoy that kind of work. I'm also a recovering attorney, former IT consultant, and I'm also a huge nerd and a dog enthusiast. I love my dog, that's Hachi, my little buddy. And I also love to travel and explore the world with him. So that's me in a nutshell. That's me. That's my story in a nutshell. Sorry. And today we're talking about setting intentions. Now, this is not meant to be an exhaustive conversation like the last one. Imposter syndrome is a pretty vast topic, and most of what we're talking about today and yesterday throughout this whole series is relatively general, right? We're talking about specific situations, but the concepts are still pretty general, and we want to make sure that they apply to as many people as possible so that we can actually help as many people as possible. If there are specific situations that you want to discuss with me or with a member of my team, please reach out. I'd be happy to talk with you, and we'll have my contact information at the end of the webinar, so you can grab that. You can also leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to reply and reach out to you so we can talk more. But please feel free to schedule some time so we can chat. Today, we're talking about the genesis of imposter syndrome, where we're going to review that. We're also going to talk about the components of a management role, what's involved in management, and how does that change from being an individual contributor to moving into management. We're also going to understand how shifting to management affects your imposter, right? How does that change in your role, in your context, affect how your imposter sees you and how your imposter sees the situation, and then how you deal with your imposter. And lastly, we're going to talk about, as usual, how to manage your imposter. So this is going to be very practical, very much how do you deal with this, how to keep moving forward, okay? I still have a little imposter syndrome. It doesn't go away. That feeling that you shouldn't take me that seriously. What do I know? I share with you because we all have doubts in our abilities, about our power and what that power is. Now, like last time, as you might guess, this is not some person off the street who's random and doesn't really have an experience or doesn't have anything behind them. This is Michelle Obama. Last time was Maya Angelou. This is now Michelle Obama. These are folks who deal with imposter syndrome still to this day, even though they're as successful as they are. Even before she was first lady, Michelle Obama was a very successful attorney in her own right. She had a lot of accomplishments, and she did some amazing things. And this quote was actually after she was first lady. So despite everything that she's accomplished, all the things she's done in her life, she still has imposter syndrome. I think that's important to note. Something I think I mentioned last time, but imposter syndrome doesn't necessarily go away. It never really goes away, right? That voice is always going to be there a little bit. You just get better at dealing with it. And so this is going to be kind of the first thing to talk about how to build that muscle to be better at dealing with it as we go forward. Okay. So what is the definition of imposter syndrome, which again, we covered last time, so I'm going to walk through it quickly. The persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. People often will talk about luck. I'm lucky, I'm not good, I'm not that great, and that gets in the symptoms, right? Lack of confidence is one of the most common symptoms, right? People are always self-deprecating themselves. You know, that there's self-deprecating humor, and then there's like where it takes a little bit too far, right? Where you know that person does have confidence issues. And now I do want to distinguish this though. Confidence issues don't automatically equal imposter syndrome. All right. Confidence is a separate and related concept to imposter syndrome, which is one of the symptoms. Feeling like a fraud, right? Being able to be afraid of being discovered or exposed for, not being who you say you are, not being who you think you are, not being who you feel you are. That's a very common symptom of imposter syndrome as well. Constantly on edge. You're always stressing and worrying, like, okay, what if this person doesn't really take me seriously? Or what if this person doesn't think what I did was right? Even though you may think or know what you did was right, you may be worried about being questioned. You may be worried about people taking that and saying, well, this wasn't right, so that means you must be an imposter. You must not know what the heck you're doing here, right? That's an always, if you always have that feeling or have that kind of concept in your head of waiting for that axe to drop, that's a symptom of imposter syndrome. Extreme risk aversion. There's something covered last time again, which is you don't want to take risks, even calculated ones, right? You don't feel like this, it's worth it. Like, even if you know this is the right course of action, if it's somewhat risky and you might be questioned later, you don't want the blame to come back on you. Again, a lot of this sounds like kind of basic insecurity, but there's a little bit deeper qualities to this here, right? Where you're talking about these things all together. That's what imposter syndrome is, and it can be very, like I said, very sinister in how subtle it is and how it eats you off from the inside in a bad way, right? So that whole taking risks concept, it tends to shoot us in the foot, right? We don't take risks because we're afraid of the results if we take a risk and we fail. Now, when you take a risk, you're obviously there's some kind of reward inside that risk, right? But if you don't take a risk, others see that you're not taking the risk. Others see that you're not taking that step forward, even though what you may be saying or doing may be the right way of moving forward. If others realize that and know that, hey, this person just has no confidence in themselves, well, guess what? That's going to end up hampering you and hampering your career and hurting your reputation in their eyes anyway. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The funny thing about risk aversion, though, the risk aversion piece of it, is that you avoid risks to avoid making mistakes, right? But there are risks that are important to take sometimes, right? No risk, no reward. So if you know that this is a calculated risk that will have the reward that you want at the end of it, where you know that this is actually the right course of action, others may know that as well, or they may actually feel like this is the right course of action, and they're going to notice that you didn't take that step forward, that you didn't advocate for this, even though you knew this was the right way to go, and they're going to see that as a lack of confidence in your own abilities. And then what happens? Then they lose confidence in you because they're going to think to themselves, this person doesn't have confidence in themselves. Why should I have confidence in them too? So then what ends up happening from there is you end up looking bad anyway, right? You end up looking like you're more of a fraud than you were before. So in trying to avoid looking like a fraud, you end up looking like a fraud even more. So you see how this is really there's some strong dissonance there. And so you got to be careful with that whole thing with imposter syndrome. And that's where it becomes really, really sinister sometimes. So what is the genesis of the imposter? So as we explained last time, you have the world out there, and then you have your view of things, right? Now, in between the world and your view, you have what's called a contextual identity, right? The contextual identity acts as a filter, as an initial filter. You have another identity, another filter called your absolute identity. Between these two things, your contextual identity is going to be what's different between different scenarios in your life. For example, you have one way of being, one way of operating with your family, another way of operating with your friends, another way of operating with your coworkers and people that you interact with through your professional career, right? You may have different ways of operating for different contexts in your life, whatever number of contexts you have. They may be similar, but there's even a little bit of different variance between them. That's your contextual identity coming in to say, okay, well, depending on this, I have to maybe bring up this part of my identity a little more, or I have to highlight this part of who I am, or be a little bit different with these people. That's different identities that you ought to take on. And that's natural because it's contextual. The absolute identity, on the other hand, your absolute identity is going to be who you are at your core, your thoughts, your values, your beliefs, right? Who you are inside. That's something that cannot be taken away from you. No matter what happens, you're still you at your core. And that's the part that doesn't change unless you intentionally work on that to grow it and change it. right? Now, what happens is you have information that flows into the contextual identity, and that changes into story, right? Your identities change that into some kind of a story, right? It's meaning making of the world, right? You also do that again to the second filter, which is going to be your absolute identity, right? Now, what ends up becoming your view is not exactly the exact information that comes through. It's going to be interpreted information. Your mind is interpreting that information for whatever purpose, whether that's survival, whether that's just to make sense of it, or whether it's just to process it in general and try to help you to take some course of action. Now, the problem is you have confirmation bias, you have all these other biases that come into play, and that's where your identities can be kind of misleading for you. All right. The information and story go back and forth. And so what happens is the information you have is not always 100% accurate. When imposter syndrome comes into play, it's a misalignment of these identities, right? Your contextual identity is telling you one thing, and then your absolute identity has not been caught up to where your contextual identity is. And so it doesn't have faith that that's really what's happening. It doesn't have faith that it doesn't believe what it's seeing as much as what's happening. So it's saying to itself, are you sure you're really qualified to be taking this course of action? Or are you sure you're qualified to be evaluating these kinds of thoughts, these kinds of decisions? And if that's the case, you're going to be having some dissonance between those two identities. That's where imposter syndrome comes in. Now, remember what I said earlier, your absolute identity can only be changed intentionally. So you have to actively work on that to change your absolute identity to say, hey, I'm okay with this. I'm capable of doing what I need to do, and I'm competent in what I do, right? Now, that can go into overdrive when you go into completely new situations, such as moving to management, right? Now, when we're talking about a management role, there's a number of things that are different when you make that move. First of all, you're going from an individual contributor to a people manager or a process manager for that matter. Either way, it's a different kind of role, right? You're not for one side of the things, you're sitting there talking about productivity in the creation process and in what are you producing? What's the work product you're creating? What are you outputting? Right? That's the individual contributor role. Your success or your failures or whatever are judged by whatever you put out into the world. Whatever you say, hey, I need to write a report, that's individual contributor work. You're going to write the report, you're going to turn it in. Success, right? As a manager, however, you're not writing reports all the time. Maybe once in a while you may have to, especially if you're talking to reporting to other people up above you. But you're not going to do it as often as you have to do as often as you did before. You're not going to be doing the actual grunt work, the one-on-one kind of, let me do this client work, or let me do this actual calculations or whatever. You're going to be managing the folks who are doing that kind of work. So now your productivity, your definitions of success, they all change. And so now your success is not just your success, it's actually the team's success as a whole, right? So you're going to be, instead of being responsible for yourself, well, now you're involved in being responsible for John, for Susie, for Jake, for Alex, for all these other people that are on your team, right? Those are that's going to be a success for you, is if they all succeed or if they're doing the best they can and producing what they need to produce. Your job now becomes to manage their work, right? Not to manage them in terms of saying like micromanaging, like, oh, let me make sure that you're doing everything right exactly the right way I wanted to do it. But no, it's a matter of management, right? Of saying like, I need to make sure that they do what makes sense and what's productive for the team, right? For whatever needs to get done that you need to report up on. All right. So it's not going to be as much of the individual contributor work. Now, your brain is not used to processing things that way, right? You're not used to processing your time that way and allocating your time that way. You're not used to saying, okay, I was productive today because I got Susie and these guys, I was a resource for them and they got everything done. That's not what you're used to doing. You're used to saying, oh, I produced 5 documents today, 3 reports, analyzed some data and got the numbers together and I turned them in and we're good to go, right? Those are the kind of things you're used to doing. You're used to saying, oh, maybe you're used to saying, I wrote 1,000 lines of code today, or I got this program done, right? Or used to saying that I got these tax returns done, or whatever it looks like. Whatever it is, you're used to doing the actual work. Up until now, that's been how you define success. But now it's not so much about that anymore. It's about managing the people and the processes. And so now, instead of doing the actual work, you're making sure that you're enabling them to get the work done. You're removing obstacles from their way to get things done. You're making sure that they're helping them to navigate the processes, to say, you know what, there's a political situation here, let me get that out of the way for them, right? Oh, Susie needs to work with this other team over there. Let me make sure that let me facilitate that interaction, make sure that they have what they need on both sides, so everything gets done, right? Maybe you're working with the clients more on the high level stuff, like the contract discussions, or making sure that work is actually produced in a way that the client wants, and you're communicating with the client more regularly. There's so many different contexts, but the idea being the same, you're not the one on the ground doing the actual work. One of the great ways to look at this is actually to think about a skyscraper, right? Any organization is like a skyscraper. When you go into an organization at the bottom level, at the base individual contributor level, you are on the ground floor, right? You can see every speck of dust on the ground. You can see the pieces of trash. You can see the traffic outside. You can see everyone coming in and out of the building every day. And you can make sure that everything is good to go on that ground level, right? You don't have visibility up at the top, but you know for sure that the ground level is your responsibility and you'll take care of that. As you move up in the organization now, you're moving up into different levels of the organization. So you move a little higher up, right? You're moving to level 5, for example. Now you're a mid-level manager. Well, now you're responsible for that floor, but you can't see everything on that bottom level. What you got to do is you have to call downstairs and make sure that everyone down there is doing what they're doing and saying, okay, well, how are things going down there? You know what I mean? How's the floors? Are the floors look good? Is there any trash on the floors? Or how's the dust? How many people are coming in and out of the building? Are they checking in? Are we all good to go? Cool. So you're relying on others reporting up to you in terms of what's going on. The higher up in the organization you go, all the way to the top, to the CEO on the penthouse level, he or she's not able to look at this and say, okay, well, let me know exactly what's happening on the ground level. They're going to call down to the mid levels and say, okay, what's going on downstairs? How are things going? Give me a report on how things have been going. What are the trends looking like? Right? If there's a big situation, sure, they'll know about it. But their job's not to look at that. Their job's to look outward, right? You see the weather, you see other buildings and what's going on with them. You see how they're being built. You're seeing the plane traffic. You're seeing the strategic long-term view. The higher up in organization, that's what you look at more and more, right? So in the management role, it's the exact same thing. You're looking at efficiencies. How do we make sure that we're more efficient? What are our processes looking like, right? The team's looking at you now, looking to you now for guidance in terms of how do we do this? How do we do this better, right? And so you're now looking at things in the bigger picture, slightly bigger because you're only one level removed, but the higher up you go, the bigger the picture becomes. And now you're responsible for more and more of the processes, more of the people. And now you think about imposter syndrome, that puts a whole lot of pressure on you and puts your imposter into overdrive. All right. Because now you're not just responsible for yourself, now you're responsible for other people as well. And you've never done this before. And oh no, what do I do? Are you qualified for this? Are you sure you're ready to do this? These are all things your imposter is really going into overdrive talking about. And so now you have that voice we talked about last time, that person, that friend or family member who, again, wants the best for you, but has no idea how to get you there. And so their only way to do it is to panic and get you to panic and maybe get you to give up on what you're doing. So let's talk about how to make that a little bit different. All right. Here's another activity that again, I'll ask you to close your eyes if you're able to. If you're operating heavy machinery or driving, anything like that, please don't do that while you're doing this. Or don't do this while you're doing that, I should say. Wait till you have some time to do this. Quiet place, relatively relaxed. Don't have to worry about any heavy machinery or anything like that, or any kind of risk to yourself. So once you're comfortable in a safe place, I invite you to close your eyes. Take a moment to breathe in as deeply as you can. Hold it. And breathe out through your mouth. Breathe in through your nose. Hold it. And breathe out through your mouth. One more time. Breathe in through your nose. Hold it. And breathe out through your mouth. Now, just as you continue breathing, I want you to think back and remember your imposter from last session. Remember his or her name. Think about them. I want you to imagine for yourself, visualize that you're sitting down and having a conversation with them. Just catching up, talking to them about what's happening in your life. New developments, new things you're working on. And then tell them what's going on with your position, your new management position. You're a new manager for the first time. Or a new manager in this company for the first time. Let them know how much it means to you. Really verbalize it so they understand. Assure them that you'll be careful. You'll learn everything you need to learn, and you'll use what you've already learned in this role. Remind them and remind yourself that you earned this. You worked for this. Keep breathing in through your nose. Hold it and out through your mouth. You worked really hard for this. Now, you're not going to have all the answers all the time, and that's okay, because no one does. Not even the CEO of the company has all the answers all the time. You're not supposed to. You have resources to tap into. You have people you can reach out to. You will use them appropriately. Once again, you've got this. You're reassuring the imposter. You're reassuring this person, whatever their name is, use their name as much as you need to. And remember that person's face. So you remember how you interact with that person. However you would handle it with that person, handle it the exact same way to assure them, to reinforce them, and let them know, hey, I got this. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have to make me worry about this. Chill the hell out. Whatever, how we talk to them, as informal as it needs to be. It doesn't have to be formal, doesn't have to be anything. However you talk to this person in real life, talk to them that same way. Take a couple more breaths. And come back when you're ready and open your eyes. If you need more time, feel free to pause this at this point. Go through that as many times as you need to. And then we'll keep going. All right. Now, what did we just do? We used a visualization exercise to engage with our imposter, an otherwise invisible being, an individual thing is in your head, right? You have to remember who the imposter is, right? The imposter is just a part of you. At the end of the day, it's a part of you. There's no such thing as self-sabotage, all right? At some level or not, that self, the part of you that's doing this, doesn't think it's sabotage. Sabotage is relative. Everything is relative. To that part of you, it's helping you. It's trying to help you the only way it knows how. It's a very immature and ineffective way to help you, absolutely, but it's trying to help and protect you, right? And that's why the imposter is. That's why they exist. They exist because they think they need to exist to help you, right? They're the voice of reason in their minds, when in reality, they're the voice of panic. Silence that voice. Let them relax. Tell them, take a seat and relax. You got this, all right? Separate you from it, because it doesn't have the experience that you do, right? It's like a child version of you, like I said before. It doesn't understand the concepts that you understand. It doesn't understand complex concepts. You can even think of it as a lizard brain, right? The lizard brain needs to focus on either fight, flight, or freeze. Sorry, I forgot what that was. Fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the three things a lizard brain can do, right? If you break those down, though, fight is you're moving towards something, you're fighting through something, right? You're fighting for what you desire, what you want. Flight is you're running away from something. You're free. You're operating out of fear. And freeze is you just don't know which one to do. You don't know what to do, right? That's probably the worst ones to deal with, actually. But fighting means you're fighting for something important to you. What's important to you? What do you desire? What's your goal in the situation, right? What do you want? Don't operate out of fear, because that's what the imposters are operating out of. It's a be careful of getting hurt. Be careful of failing. Be careful of this, everything, whatever this, what's going on here. This is new. It's unfamiliar to me. I don't know how to handle it. I don't know how to do this. That must mean you don't know how to do it either. So I'm going to run. So let's avoid it at all costs. The problem with running, though, and operating out of fear is you know what you're running from, but you have no idea what you're running to. You're just running away from that thing. And that could take you anywhere. Most often than not, it's going to take you in the direction you don't necessarily want to go. Sometimes the way to get to where you want to go, to your goal, is through what you're afraid of. And that's where the imposter does not know how to deal with it. Address the imposter and address them directly, right? You want to talk to them and say, here's the concerns you have. I understand the concerns you have. They're valid concerns. However, not here, not right now, because I got this already. I already know what I'm doing. I've thought about those concerns and I know how to deal with them, right? And then you keep moving yourself forward and proving yourself right. And every time you prove yourself right, have another conversation with your imposter and say, hey, see, told you I got this. Told you. I hate to say I told you so, but I actually don't hate to say that. Right? That's what you're going to say to them and remind them that you got this. All right. So what now? Remember that management success is not individual success, right? And in any new role, there's a shift that needs to happen. There's a change in how you operate that needs to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have imposter syndrome if you have any one of those things, or if you're moving to a new role and have some kind of fear or reticence about it. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you're nervous about what you're doing. That's fine. The level when it gets to imposter syndrome is where it becomes crippling and becomes inhibitive of you being successful and doing what you need to do, right? Or at least affects your work and affects how you interact with others. Ensure that you're focusing on the right criteria for success. All right. Make sure that you're defining your success effectively so that you can keep reinforcing yourself and saying, yes, yeah, I got this. I'm doing this. I'm doing a good job. I'm doing great at what I'm doing. And that comes from setting boundaries with managers, setting expectations with managers, people that are above you, directors or whatever levels, whoever is above you, finding out what their expectations are of you for that role. That's in any role, not just management role, but just especially important when you're talking about a new management role for yourself. All right. Understand the goal of your imposter and where it's coming from, right? Remember what we just talked about just now. Your imposter is still part of you and still cares about you. It wants to do what's best for you, but has no idea how. So you got to be able to address it and help it understand. You know what's going on. You know what you're doing. And lastly, address it directly. All right. So that is it for today. I hope you guys all enjoyed today's session. I hope it was effective for you and helpful. Like I said, if you enjoyed it, if it was really effective for you, please feel free to reach out and thank them and leave a comment below. Let me know how it affected you, how it was helpful. If you want to talk further, my information is right there. If you scan that QR code, you will find a link or to my calendar, which will allow you to book some time with me to talk one-on-one. And yeah, I appreciate it, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and I look forward to chatting with you guys further in the future. Definitely join our next session in 2 weeks, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care.